Oh man, it's Friday night. Here we go. I am your host, Daniel Crosier. This is COFOH Live Undead, and I am joined by the amazing Josh Schlossberg. Oh man!
Do I have something on my face?
Oh, Josh, how are you, sir?
Oh, quite well, quite well. How are you?
Good. Held up in bed with obvious things going on with my lower leg.
A little laid up, but we're glad to still have you alive.
Thanks. Yeah, happy to be here. It's great to see your face. It's been a little while, a few months. You know, I think last fall we did something.
Perhaps time doesn't make any sense anymore. I don't know. It could have been 20 years ago. Who knows?
I know that's what my hairline says too. It's doesn't matter. It just keeps retreating. Josh, you've been pretty busy during the quarantine stuff. Like I said before, we've had you on the show a couple times. You and Denver Horror Collective to talk about your books that you've put out during this time. And you've got a new one out. Is it Malinae? Is that right?
That's one way to pronounce it. So I pronounce it Malinae. You can pronounce it. So what's my rule? My rule is that if you buy the book, you can pronounce it any way you like. But Malinae is one way that I'm pronouncing it. Yeah, that's my cosmic folk horror novella that has just come out from D&T Publishing.
Fantastic. That's pretty cool. We'll throw up the art here. I'll take that down real quick. But so yeah, tell us a little bit about this book. You know what it's about, and yeah.
Basically, it is about an elderly protagonist named Ward, and he's dealing with his elderly wife who has dementia. And what ends up happening is she's taking a real turn for the worse, and he starts to wonder, I don't think this is dementia. And he finds out there's a darker force behind it all, and he endeavors to save his wife and what turns out to be trying to save the rest of humanity, because this is a pretty hardcore thing that he's dealing with. So it's what I call elder horror. It's becoming a subgenre. Actually, we have a couple other folks at D&T Publishing. Their books also have elderly protagonists and deal with elderly folks. So I don't know what that really means, but we might actually be doing some sort of little virtual tour where we're all kind of talking about that tie-in. But
yeah,
if you're not into elderly people, that's fine. There's still there's a cosmic horror element. There's a folk horror element, as in this isolated place with all sorts of weird things going on behind the scenes. And yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. I think it's both an easy read for folks and at the same time really exciting. And I feel like I put a lot of stuff into it. So I think it digs deep into the psyche, and some people find it actually upsetting. There was one 5-star review. She said she had to put it down for a little bit because it was making her claustrophobic. So I'm like, that's a mission accomplished.
Yeah, that's pretty successful. If the written word can really compel such an encompassing feeling.
Yeah, I haven't figured out how to do jump scares on the page yet, but I'm working on that. Maybe the next one.
Yeah. So cosmic horror and folk horror. That sounds like an interesting bridge to gap.
Yeah, well, So the cosmic horror element, I don't want to talk too much about because it ends up being a spoiler, but I got to at least let
Okay.
people know what they're getting into. But so it definitely has a Lovecraftian aspect to it, and that's pretty much all I'll say about it. But in terms of the folk horror, so that's newly being identified as a subgenre. Folk horror has been around for, well, since folk
Forever.
stories, but in terms of delineating that specifically, that's kind of a newer phenomenon. Okay, this counts as folk horror, this counts as folk horror. But if you look at the list of what people claim to be folk horror, let's see if I can remember it off the top of my head. Stuff like an isolated situation here, strange, almost ritual happenings, a major component of the major reveal, and isolation, but also tying into the landscape. So those are four elements that more or less are considered what makes something folk horror. I didn't set out to write, I'm going to write folk horror. I just realized, whoa, I'm writing folk horror. And I'm actually working on a new novel right now that is basically what I'm calling modern American environmental Jewish folk horror.
Okay.
So
Right.
there's a ton of those out there already, I know, but I figured like I'd put it one more of those. So it's going to have environmental components to it. It's going to tie a little bit of Jewish horror into it because that's something I've been focusing on a little bit in terms of a new anthology that we're putting out. So that's where my next piece is. And, the problem with us authors, we're always focused on the next one and then we get bored with our old ones. But I definitely hope folks will pick up Malinae. You can go on Amazon. You can go on D&T Publishing. You can go to this place called Godless. If people haven't been on Godless.com, it's an indie horror distributor. So you can pick up the ebook there. You need to go to Amazon for the paperback and the hardcover. We should have it out in bookstores soon, however. And you can also go to my website, joshsworstnightmare.com, and you can find the different ways to purchase it. But buy it, give it a read. Tell me what you think. If you're like, this sucks, tell me, so then I can write a better one next time. So let me know.
That's wow. That's pretty cool. That it sounds like you got a lot of the distribution covered. What was the response from the publisher when you turned in your novel?
As in after she had accepted, or the final?
The final piece.
They were into it.
Nice.
Yeah. So what's funny is, so D&T Publishing. So Dawn Shea is her name, and she is actually a nurse who has worked with dementia patients. So the fact that she chose my novella that is based in that world, based in dementia and Alzheimer's stuff, that meant a lot to me. It meant that I did treat it respectfully and realistically, because if I had tried to stigmatize people with Alzheimer's or anything like that, she wouldn't have picked it up because she's literally worked with these people. So I was pleased that she was into it. When I found out her background, I was like, wow, that's a relief, because I don't want to, I'm not trying to like be afraid of people with Alzheimer's. And the spoiler, which is basically in the trailer and stuff like that, is the Alzheimer's is the least of what's going on with this character, Malinae.
Right. Wow. That's, I think that's a wonderful take. We've already got some comments coming in. I want Josh's shirt. So I guess you're going to have to mail that, sir.
Well, so you can go to denverhorror.com, and we do sell the Denver Horror Collective t-shirts, and we should be getting more merchandise in soon. I think we're going to have mugs and laptop cases and machetes. So
of course, that is the consummate writing tool.
You need one of those. I agree.
Yeah, most definitely. And we do have scrolling at the bottom for everybody that's watching, denverhorror.com. So make sure to visit there after the show.
Yeah, not yet. Wait, hold on.
Yet. Brad says hello, sup COFOH. And then Brenda says it gets you right at the beginning.
So I assume she's referring to Malinae, not the shirt, but could be both.
Could be both. She's quite taken by the shirt. We know that.
Well, that's very kind. Brenda is a member of Denver Horror Collective. I paid her to be here to say these things. So,
Oh, that's nice. That's nice to have your own entourage. And then Andy turned in, "Hey guys, hi Josh, loved Melanie." I'm butchering it. I'm terrible.
Malinae, you
Melanie.
have to be
Now it's
pronouncing
French or
Italian.
Italian. It's got more of an Italian thing.
Well,
Yeah.
the thing is, any book you take your own interpretation on, so you can do that with the
Right.
title. Well, thank you. Andy wrote a really nice review about the book, and so I thank you, Andy, and thanks for tuning in. And Andy has a Facebook group, a horror fiction Facebook group, which you should
Oh,
check
cool.
out. I think he's got actually a couple, so check out his stuff. He's doing some great stuff. The horror community is so great and so supportive. And yeah, what we're doing at Denver Horror Collective, for people like, well, what is that? It's a group of horror creators around Denver, all Colorado. We actually have people around the country. And for $20 membership, you get to be a part of all sorts of things, from critique groups to actually, you don't even have to be a member to be a part of that, just to get your stuff critiqued. But we have all sorts of critique groups. We do book clubs. We have all sorts of events that we used to do in person, more mostly doing online, a whole bunch of different stuff. We're going to have a podcast that I'm going to be doing. Actually, it's going to be Josh's Worst Nightmare podcast, but it will be presented by Denver Horror Collective, and we'll be having Denver Horror Collective members on.
Cool.
And Brenda Tolian and Joy Yaley have a podcast as well called Burial Plot, and it brings in a lot of Denver Horror Collective members. So we're doing a lot of cross-pollinating. We're kind of doing what a lot of comedians do, where they have their thing and it's their own little pirate ship, but they play well with others, and the rising tide lifts all boats. And
oh, that's cool.
That's what we're about. And so if you're a horror writer, a horror reader, or you want to be, or any sort of creator, we have artists, we have all sorts of folks. Engage with us. Even if you don't become an official member, there's lots of cool things to be a part of. But if you do, we actually promote your book. So every week we have Terror Tuesdays, and we promote the work of one of our members. So we're always trying to put out stuff there into the world. And that's kind of the idea. You come to Denver Horror Collective, you find about this one author, you find out about all these other authors. And we have so many talented folks who are at all sorts of experience levels. There's people like me who can barely write at all and are barely literate, to people who have been doing this for many, many years. And
yeah. But to be fair, I mean, you have a background as a journalist, right?
Unfortunately.
Oh, why do you say unfortunately? Because you had a specific area of expertise, I think, right?
I am a journalist. I was saying on sabbatical, I'm kind of a journalist in exile right now is more accurate. I've written about lots of different things, a lot of science, environmental, social controversies is a lot of what I've written on. I've just taken a step back for a little bit from journalism to focus on some of the other things, including fiction writing. I would like to be a journalist again. I need to wait for the journalism field to, how do I put this, evolve.
Okay. Yeah, it's kind of a toxic arena, I suppose.
It's a poo-poo place to be. Yeah. That's the only way I can. It's the only way I can put it. But I've found a lot of crossover between journalism and fiction writing, and most journalism is fiction anyway. So might as well just write totally fake stories that from the start. This is fake, everyone. I'm not trying to BS you. And here's the funny thing: you can tell more truth in fiction than you often can in journalism.
It tends to be a pretty strong delivery tool, especially for like universal messages and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I do want to say things with my books, but I always let the story guide the way. So I never try to make here's the propaganda I want everyone to think. Right. Sometimes I have an idea. Okay, so I'm writing an environmental horror novel next, and there's going to be an environmental theme, but I'm not letting that guide the whole thing. In fact, the plot itself has taken its own twists and turns, and a lot of times the theme evolves as you write it. And I do think it's not a great idea to be like, all right, I'm going to write a book, and the idea is that, apricots are the worst fruit. It's like, no, write a book about apricots, and then you might talk about the shadow side of apricots. You want to also get in the positive side. So you want to have all the elements, and
Right.
people can take it away from what you want. You might, by the end of it, writing about peaches. That's the worst example anyone could ever give, but you get the point.
Right. No, but that's good. Making kind of delivering all sides, but at the same time, kind of having this fulfilling morsel of a meal. That is really inviting and engaging to people, and yeah, they're gonna have their own takeaways, like with reviews, their own perceptions and what they like, what they don't like. It's a lot of it is subjective.
It's all subjective, and that's the thing. There's no, oh, that's a good fiction book, like says you, or that's a terrible fiction book, says you. I can't tell you how many like, oh, this person won all these awards and the best thing, and I'm like, okay, I'm 20 pages into it and I don't even want to read this anymore. Versus, what's this in the dusty book bin in the back of the store? This is my new favorite author. So I stopped giving into any sort of social proof long ago for that. I need to decide for myself.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. With Malinae, where did that idea stem from?
So that actually came from a real life circumstance. Now, not the characters or anything like that, but my grandparents. My grandfather had some physical difficulties. My grandmother had dementia. And so my grandmother, she passed away actually in the winter this year, and my grandfather passed away a year ago. But they had a good long run. They were in their late 90s and everything. But nice. I was watching the situation, and my grandmother being very brave and my grandfather also being brave, but seeing it through the eyes of my grandfather. It's one thing, okay, I'm going to see it through the eyes of the person who's suffering for this. To me, I was like, this must be a lot that he's going through. And he's seeing his wife of 70 years, I guess, appear to change, and how frustrating that is and upsetting. Right. And so I thought, I'm going to write about that. And then, of course, I had to inject some sort of crazy other element. So it's definitely not just about a guy watching his wife waste away. It goes, there's a whole other different things. And it's actually inspiring. I'm not going to say whether or not it has a happy ending or not, but I write about the shadow in order to understand it, to process it, and to push through the shadow, and not to repress the shadow, mind you, but to push through the shadow. And that's what I tried to do in Malinae. So taking that real life circumstances, and then the characters aren't them or anything like that, and I just wanted to tell that story. And I sometimes think of myself as an old man in some ways anyway. I've always gotten along with elderly people. I always gotten along with my grandparents, so it's kind of an homage to older folks who are, it's tough to get through the day when you're just all rickety and, well,
Yeah, I'm already there. I am a cautionary tale.
Exactly. So that was the premise behind it. It was nothing more complicated than that. I wanted to tell that story. And I had also written 2 novels prior that were too much for publishers to handle. I'm like, what is something that is more accessible? And I didn't want to, I don't ever think in terms of that. I think of what's interesting to me. But then I was like, okay, what is interesting to me and people might be able to basically market or put in a box. I don't even want to say market, but this is a clear horror story. My other ones were like harder to make sense of in terms of where they fit. So I just wanted to do almost a traditional horror tale. So it will be comfortable in that, okay, I get this format. I'm not experimenting in that world, but then I bring my own unique twist to it, which is not for everyone. I'm a weird guy, and it comes out on the
page. You say you're a weird guy, but I think you're going to be pretty fun at parties, when you're able to do that again.
That goes with the territory. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Now when you say like there's some of your writing that publishers just were either in dismay or turned off by, would you say, I came across this, fantastic angina.
That's one example. Yeah.
Is that one question? All right.
That is the only short story. Now, I guess I have one other that no one would ever publish. No one touched Tangina. I ended up, if you want, it's 99 cents on Amazon. You can just buy the short story. It's actually pretty damn tame. That's what's funny about, but they couldn't handle I don't know. Do people just are that afraid of vaginas? I don't know. I don't know what they thought.
Yeah, probably so. You remember, like, I recall that movie Teeth.
Oh, yeah.
I forgot the condition where teeth and calcium build up in the vagina, but but yeah, that's kind of a long running. I think as far back as like at least Greek times, that type of story of sticking your penis in something unknown and unforeseen.
That is our plight in life. Yeah. So that's actually a feminist tale. Hangina is a feminist tale about a guy who has some backwards views about women. He starts growing what appears to be a vagina in the center of his hand, and he starts having different life experiences and maybe starts seeing things a little bit from the other side. Not that a woman's experience is simply having a vagina,
right.
But what's funny is anytime you touch on any of those topics, even if people are like, I don't know if we should be talking about blah, blah, blah. And my previous one, I wrote a novel that does tie into basically elements. The main character is a radical feminist, and then he's friends with like a men's rights activist. So I cover the whole territory. I poke fun at and point out the good things of all the elements. What's funny is the editors who looked at it, they all took like, oh, I feel like it's preaching too much of this. And it's like, it was literally the opposite. The whole point of that one was to show, don't fall for any ideology, think for yourself. Right. But it's so funny that some of them are like, oh, it seems like you're pushing this when it was so I realized, you got to don't have any of those elements in it. And I'm not even going to get into the plot because whatever, but the one prior to that, which I will talk about the plot, was about a religious order that worshiped viruses as gods.
Oh, okay.
They went about deliberately spreading. To get up into echelons of the cult, you would have to spread one disease to a certain amount of people. There'd be an initiation to catch a disease inside the cult. They were basically like hippies sort of, and then you catch the disease, then you had to spread it to certain people. Then you can keep going up in the cult. And I thought it was a cool idea.
Yeah.
But no, it wasn't packageable. It wasn't horror. It wasn't sci-fi. It was sort of satire, black comedy. So there is this real element of, you don't want to put yourself into a box, but the rest of the world sure does. So I compromised. I don't even want to say that. I didn't compromise with Malinae. I found an overlap between my weird world and what I think people are willing to digest and what can be publishers are open to. And the fact that it got picked up fairly quickly by D&T Publishing suggests, okay, you don't always have, it's like, be yourself, they say. Be yourself, write what you know. But what they don't tell you is like, what if you're a total lunatic?
Right.
And you might have to moderate it a little bit.
Yeah. Be yourself, but kind of roll it back a little bit.
Don't be entirely yourself all the time.
Yeah.
No, still be yourself. Everything in Malinae is myself. I just found that sweet spot between, that intersect between me and the rest of the world. And I hope people like it. And I'm looking forward to getting it out there more while I'm working on my other one. So, yeah.
That's cool. So with that type of, bridge, kind of joining, I guess like a more mainstream sensibility, so to speak. And then, your approach to writing, did you find that you had to change up, the whole approach, or maybe how you wrote, or anything stylistically?
No, it was really just in the idea choosing stage. So of all the ideas I have, I'm like, okay, maybe that one, not so much. Oh, that one might be it. And really, that was the idea that resonated with me the most at the time, was just seeing what was going on with my grandparents and knowing that I wanted to really focus in on that, and having all these cool ideas just pop into my head. Okay, this move turns into this one turns into this. And that it just kind of wrote itself It just wrote itself, really. So yeah, I didn't like try to write something that, oh, will people like this? I was just like, that's an idea that is both me and maybe the rest of the world will be cool with it. And
Yeah.
based on that, we're right. So yeah.
Well, it's such a, an endearing topic to approach too, and obviously a very personal one.
Right.
So, I'd imagine, do you think it's pretty easy with, if you've got, so much feeling and heart into it, it comes from a personal place like that, is it pretty easy to guess that, well, there's got to be an audience that's really, that this will touch them too, that they've had these type of experiences, and then to take them on a different journey through that.
Yeah, well, I think that's definitely true. And I think obviously as there are more older people in the world who are needing care, pretty much everyone that resonates with them. But I think you also made another good point. You can write about something that is totally not in other people's sphere, but if you personally feel it and personally resonates with you, that will come across on the page. So yeah, but I do think with the fact that dealing with their grandparents, everyone at least knows somebody of that age or has known somebody of that age. So it's more and more a real issue, and it ties into my whole biological horror thing. So my thing is biological horror, which I define as basically just tying into biology. So living creatures and vital processes. So anything in that world. So a brain disease, and then there are other things that tie into biological horror and Malinae that I'm not going to give away. But that concept of biological horror, that's what drives me. Almost the natural world and how our bodies work. And it's so elements of body horror, but I'm not a huge, like, let's tear people's skin off and write about it. I won't shy away for it. If somebody's skin needs to be torn off in a book, their skin's coming off. But I don't personally necessarily gravitate towards that. But the natural world, I do. Weird things like microbial things. Microbial horror is a lot of what I've been writing, which, I mean, the pandemic makes it almost moot at this point. But that's always been my sphere. And that's what I focus on at Josh's Worst Nightmare. So if you're into that world of things, so nature, pretty much anything I can cram it into the biological horror box. But I'm starting up a new podcast soon, Josh's Worst Nightmare.
Okay.
Nice. Yes, that'll be the first episode will be with Steve Rasnick-Tem. So he's the legendary Colorado dark fiction author. So I already recorded the first episode in that episode. So that'll be out as soon as I get my lazy ass together to put it out there in the world. But I'm going to invite people on to talk about an element of biological horror that is relevant to their writing. So it's pretty much going to be pretty much horror authors, at least in the beginning. And we'll see if I expand that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I find that, I have the best conversations with authors in general. I mean, because, they're always working on a yarn. And also, sitting down and self-contemplating and thinking about how to relate to the outside world, because, you're the ones creating all these new worlds and, new things that give us culture. So, I really appreciate, talking to guys like you, Josh. There's no shortage of conversation or topics.
We're also the most fucked up.
Good.
So that helps, right?
I think that helps. That means you're a more sensible, worldview, right?
Well, what's funny is I actually find a lot of horror authors, the vast majority of them, to be really amiable, sort of even keel people. So I think what happens is, we talk about how deranged we are. The reality is, we play that up because it's fun, but we get most of our demons out on the page. And so we're not repressing it like everyone else. Like, nothing's wrong with me. I'm not crazy. You're crazy. I'm not crazy. You're crazy. Like, we're the ones we're writing. Oh yeah. And then she has a vagina in her hand. I'm like, all right, glad I got that out of my system.
Now I can go make a sandwich.
Exactly. So I believe in processing the shadow and not ignoring the dark side, but not necessarily dwelling on it either. I think you can go too far. You start joining a satanic cult and drinking blood. Okay, maybe pull back a little bit.
Yeah, it's like, you need new hobbies, buddy.
Exactly. Like, limit, at least, at least, don't make that your main daily activity, the drinking blood.
Yeah, yeah. I guess it depends on who. If it's somebody from Wall Street, it's not like we're losing anybody important.
That's true. No, I mean, I'm fine with that. So I
Yeah,
don't want to come across as completely against that, but
yeah, exactly. You've been mentioning, processing the shadow. The shadow as is that for you? Is that a writing term, or is that like a kind of a creative approach, or is that like I'm going to reference like Dexter's Dark Passenger, from the TV series.
Mhm.
Is that kind of how you approach that?
Sure. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of overlap there. So it's a Jungian Carl Jung concept, the
Oh,
shadow, so the shadow and light. So it's basically the part of your psychology that you might not be as aware of, and most people are not, but you can start doing shadow work where you start seeing, oh, okay, so anytime this happens, I tend to have this negative reaction. Okay,
oh,
I'm going to start paying attention to that versus like, no, I never have that. That's not even true. So you start seeing maybe some of those darker aspects, and they're not necessarily always negative. Sometimes your shadow can be, I can't take praise, or I don't
right.
realize how awesome I am, and stuff like that. So the shadow is just any element, that darker element of the psyche that isn't typically, you might not notice. You can notice other people's shadow pretty damn well, but
Right.
we can't always see our own. But that's what's nice. If you like, okay, so that's Daniel's shadow, I wonder what mine is. And you're like, all right,
Hmm.
maybe it's not that, but it's this. And some people are better at hiding it. And all I know is the people who are like super cheery all the time, those are the people. Run away from those people. They're bottling their shadow up, and they're going to commit mass murder like any minute.
Ooh, yeah. Like Susie Homemaker next door. That just, yeah, that's probably not a good thing. Always chipper and stuff. It's like, what are you on today, hun?
They're creeps. Those people frighten me. So
And
yeah,
they
so
drive the
that's the shadow. And
suburban
you can get,
vehicles.
what's that?
And then they drive the big SUVs that they can't see over the dashboard too.
Well, that's part of their shadow too. They don't want to see what's over that dashboard. Yeah, that's the inner shadow. But you can start working on it, and then if you can process that into your horror, I think
Yeah.
that's the best shadow. People
Oh,
who are willing to even look at their own weird issues and put it on the page in some way. I mean, I typically don't write autobiographical stuff, but there's certainly elements of my psyche that are potpourried into different characters and stuff like that. And I'm not afraid to put all that stuff out there because I own it, right? So it's the people who are just like, I'm not going to look at that because I'm perfect in every way. And it's like, oh man.
yeah. If you're clever enough to kind of identify that in yourself, you realize, okay, it's time to do some some self work. But if you can recognize that in other people too, it's like and be clever enough to see yourself in them.
That's the
Like
key.
you know
That's the hard part because it's easy
yeah,
to be like, here's what's wrong with them, but you're like, how does that apply to me, or what is my particular shadow?
right.
It's a lifetime of work, and I'm not a psychologist or anything like that, so I can't do sessions with people, but I try to incorporate that in my work, and I try to really look at
Mm.
the investigation of it and also moving through. So I'm not actually somebody who is like, everything's shit all the time and I want you to feel like shit after you're done reading my book. I want you to feel like shit through part of the book. And then I want you to be like, oh, there's a chance. Okay, no, there
There's a
isn't.
glimmer of hope.
And then
Right.
you get to go through it and then you make it through. But then there's going to be, oh, wait, but what about this? So that's what I
Yeah.
like to do. That's my recipe for now.
Speaking of feeling like shit, Denver Horror Collective does these online critiques and stuff. I think that's a tremendous tool for people that aren't really familiar with how that goes. Me going to art school as a young kid, you're like sitting there going through this process, and you're thinking, it's like, man, this is all like personal attacks. Yeah, after one or two times, you start realizing it's like, oh, they're not attacking me. They're trying to give feedback, and sometimes the tools to deliver that just aren't sophisticated enough, so it feels like attacks. And you also don't have like a thick skin, so how do you go about that process?
Well, sometimes they are attacking you. So once in a while, but no, it's, you just get used to it. And I have to say at this point, I've got a pretty thick skin. I'm pretty confident in my writing. I always think I need to improve for sure. But yeah, I find myself even like, you don't fucking even know what I'm like, dude, pay it, listen to this, be open to it. So that's always going to be there. You're always going to be like a little bit like, this is my baby. And you're saying my baby isn't perfect, but you just got to power through that. And it's always worth it. And yeah, you're going to disregard somebody. You have to develop the ability to critique your critique, but
Mm-hmm.
you shut your damn mouth and you listen to what people are saying, and you're just like, okay. Yeah. And there's so many valuable things. So I dedicate part of Malinae to Denver Horror Collective because of how much it's helped me in terms of people critiquing my work. So over the years through the short fiction, and then we have this novel writing group, and it's dedicated specifically to that. I credit that for a lot of the critiquing of how to improve the story, and because I'm willing to be open to it, right? So that's the real key. And here's the thing: learning to critique other people makes you a better writer as well. So it's such an essential process. If you're a writer and you're not participating in critique groups, you are really stunting your growth. And just let folks know, if folks want to be a part of Denver Horror Collective, we have folks at all experience levels. No one is expected to even have to be able to string a sentence together. We're fine with that. It's a great way to get mentorship. So we do have people at beginner, intermediate, advanced levels of experience. So you got to get in there somehow. It's totally cool. We love when people come in who are just starting, because we can mold them and everything. No, but we just love that. It's such a nice thing to be able to like, oh, somebody's just starting out. And we have some folks, it's like maybe their chops aren't as honed as yet, but they have this raw talent and this ability to scare that it's an amazing thing. So definitely be a part of a critique group, whether it's through Denver Horror Collective or not.
And the nice thing too is like with your group that builds to other like creative projects, like collective short anthologies and stuff like that.
Oh, nice segue. Yeah, that's a good segue. So speaking of that, so yeah, at Denver Horror Collective, we had our first anthology. Oh, it's real life and virtual. So Terror at 5280. This was a book we collectively put out at the collective in 2000, was it 19 or something? And
I think so. I think that's when I first interviewed you.
2019. So basically several of us were editors of this, and it wasn't entirely people from Denver Horror Collective, but primarily, and then folks across Colorado. So all stories take place in Colorado, and all of them are from Colorado authors. So we have Stephen Graham Jones and Carter Wilson are kind of our big names. They're both legendary horror thriller authors. And then we had some other folks who are well seasoned, and then folks, it was their first publication, and people really seem to like this. I don't put much stock in the whole social proof thing, but we became a Denver Post bestseller, and we won an award for America's Best Books for best anthology, and then we were a finalist in horror fiction. So people were digging it. You can check it out. You can just go to denverhorror.com and find it. It's also on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles, and it's in bookstores across the country as well. So that's a cool one. And then recently we put out, so this was Consumed, right? Tales Inspired by the Wendigo. So the editors of this are Henry and Holly Snyder. So that was their baby in terms of them being editor. I did some copy edits and I was the publisher, but this was so Steve Rasnick-Tem, he's the local legend there. He was one of the big names. Wrath James White, Dana Fredsty. So these were all tales that were based on Wendigo stories. So Wendigo, the concept of Wendigo, coming from Native American oral tradition, and it's a hungering beast. So there are all sorts of different interpretations on it. And we actually are giving 20% of the proceeds to Southern Ute Indian tribe for coronavirus relief. So we think that they are really cool, and we wanted to give back to our community, and
Yeah,
that's what we're doing. So you can
that's
check
good.
that out also with denverhorror.com, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, wherever the hell else.
That's pretty cool. With now with the Wendigo theme, how did that come about? That seems obviously 5280. I mean, you guys are located in Denver. That's an obvious connection. But what was the inspiration behind putting together an anthology around the Wendigo?
So that was Henry and Holly Snyder. So they are husband and wife duo, and they are editors. And so that was their idea. They're just were into that. I mean, I know Henry does have some Native American background.
Hmm.
I think the fact that we're in the North Country, mountainous North Country, that's the creature that is affiliated with that landscape. You know, typically a lot of the Wendigo stories that come from First Nation tribes in Canada, but anything North Country is Wendigo country. So that's basically the tie-in to Denver Horror Collective and Denver. And we talk, the stories in there have to do with, sometimes it's an inner psychological Wendigo. There are a lot of different kinds of Wendigos. And yeah, we had the introduction by Owl going back,
Mm-hmm.
and he's a Native American horror author, and he gave his perspective on the concept of Wendigo and whatnot. And the stories, some of them tie into Native American folklore. Most of them are taking it in totally different directions, which is why we call it tales inspired by the Wendigo. And
Okay.
it's gradually been percolating there. We put that out last year, and
Nice.
it's or this whatever last year is. So over December 2020,
Okay.
and
Nice.
it's still fresh out there. We're still getting reviews on it. We're still getting it out there. It's a top-notch, high-quality publication. So I didn't choose the stories. That was all Henry and Holly. But when I got them all to do some copy edits, I
Mm-hmm.
was blown away. I'm like, this is, and honestly, this, obviously I'm biased and no one's going to believe me, but it ranks with any horror anthologies that are on the shelf right now. It's phenomenal. And again, I didn't pick the story, so I have no
Yeah.
reason to toot my own horn. So for that, but it's wonderful. So if you like horror, if you
Mm-hmm.
like Wendigo, I mean, you have to, it has
Yeah.
to be on your shelf.
Make sure visit denverhorror.com after this broadcast to
Not yet.
check out all the cool stuff.
Right. And also 20% to Southern Ute Indian tribe and the coronavirus relief. So
Nice.
surely that's a worthy cause.
Yeah, most definitely. There's so many communities that were hard hit, in during the pandemic. I mean, and it's still going on, and
Still going on. Yep.
still supplies can't get to everywhere. So indigenous and Native American reservations are some of those too.
Absolutely. The hardest hit areas. And the more people stay at home and read, the less the virus circulates. So
Yes.
that's what we advocate. Just stay home and read until
Yeah.
this is all over. That's what we'll have endless books for you to provide to you. So
Nice. Now, Josh, you wear a lot of hats with Denver Horror Collective. You being a writer, coordinating the group and everything, and then also editing on some of these projects. Yeah, is it pretty easy to switch back and forth, or do you just all guns a blazing, whatever needs to be done whenever?
I have to wear a hat because otherwise I get major sunburn. So it's not really a choice. But yeah, I'm just a facilitator. So I'm on the steering committee for Denver Horror Collective along with I believe 9 other folks. So I'm maybe a mouthier person, but I'm not the only one who's driving this. In fact, I'm just one of many, and I just have nothing better to do with my time. So I like being a part of all this stuff and getting it out there. And basically it's just because I was just starting as a horror author, several years ago. And there weren't places where I felt like I could really get my feet wet, or there was a community that was really helping emerging authors. So I selfishly wanted to create something that helped me and also helped others. And that's what it's doing. And it's taken on a life of its own. There are a lot of things that happen that's got nothing to do with me. I've actually opposed some things that happen. So, so I don't get to control it all.
Yeah.
But the new thing that I will be doing through Denver Horror Collective that is my baby and I will have complete control over is something called the Jewish Book of Horror.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it is a horror fiction anthology that will be coming out Hanukkah 2021.
Sweet.
And I have a Jewish background. I'm not super Jewy, but I come from a Jewish family. I went to Hebrew day school. I learned Hebrew, Ivrit, it's called. And I got my bar mitzvah. I studied the Holocaust. I have Jewish guilt. I have some Woody Allen neuroses, I suppose. So all of that checks out. And I was talking with my mom, I believe, about something. And then I was just like, I should just do a Jewish horror thing because then I can just like say whatever I want or whatever. And then it's like, that's not a bad idea. So I came up with the kernel of the idea, put out the pitch finally this winter, early winter. We got close to 100 submissions. I just chose the 20 stories. So basically it's going to be some Jewish folklore. It's tying into Jewish culture, Jewish religion in so many different angles. I am super psyched about this because the stories are fucking amazing. They're fucking amazing. They're not just written by Jewish people. I'm not going to say who's, I'm not going to put like a yellow star by their name, but there's some people who are Jewish in this. It's mostly Jews, but not entirely Jews. And is it sacrilegious? A little bit, but we actually have a rabbi who's writing the foreword, and so what folks need to know about the Jewish religion is it encourages questioning even of the religion itself. Now, there's nothing actually really blasphemous and certainly not anti-Semitic in the Jewish Book of Horror, but we do have some questioning stuff. There are some like weird little cult stories that are sort of taking a weird offshoot of what Judaism actually is. There are Jewish pirates. What else do we have here?
Wow.
Definitely Jewish demons. So a lot of demonology comes from Jewish tradition. I tried to go light on Holocaust stuff. We definitely have a Holocaust story in there, but I didn't want to make it all Holocaust. We have one Golem story. For folks who don't know, Golem is kind of like the big clay monster
creature of clay, right?
Right. Yeah. That the rabbi, you put the name of God on its head and it protects the Jewish people. That's a very common Jewish thing. We have one story about that. I didn't want to do too many of those. So a lot of this is going to kind of blindside you because you wouldn't think it has anything to do with Judaism. And then you realize it does. So tying into the Kabbalah, which is sort of this forbidden mystical script. So it's pretty cool. My background is enough that I know what belongs in that world, and then also like, okay, that's not really cool or accurate. And John Baltusberger is somebody who is vaguely affiliated with the project. I consult with him a little bit because he put out something called Of the Book, which is a Jewish horror anthology. So he beat me to that, and he put one out a couple of years ago. So I talked to him. I'm like, okay, what worked? What do you think did? And I read it. It was beautiful. I actually poached a couple of his authors because I loved them so much. And so I wanted to continue in that tradition of Jewish horror, which I think is more and more becoming a little subgenre. And again, you don't have to be Jewish to write Jewish horror. I personally don't believe that, at least. Yeah,
that's that's something I've only been recently seeing out there is Jewish horror. And more importantly, I think those perspectives need to be presented. Just like in horror, you have the African American perspective, and even like indigenous people's perspective, or Latin or Latinx. There's so many different flavors and voices that I think need to be lifted up in horror, and I think doing an anthology on Jewish horror, I think is what a fantastic idea.
Yeah, and I mean, basically behind the scenes, I just want to create more horror in the world. I'm like, what's a cool new flavor that could be out there? I think Jews are cool. I'm not like a zealot or anything like that. But and there will be a little touching on, of course, like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Nothing's very preachy, but we have people who have their opinions, and we tried to have we tried to get a variety of perspectives on that sort of stuff. And I mean, that's fair game for horror, man. That if
Right.
war isn't a shadow, if lives lost on all sides isn't a shadow, then I don't know what is.
Right. Yeah. It's man, it's a tough subject, but it's one worth exploring. We got a whole slew of comments that started pouring in here. So Brandy came in. Hi, Josh. Your book is phenomenal, and I sing your praises to anybody who will listen. Horror is at its finest. Is the type that sticks with you, and yours definitely does.
I really appreciate that. Thank you, Brandy. Really. Yeah. Brandy wrote a really great review as well. And I believe she was the person, she said she had to stop reading because it was giving her claustrophobia and then she had to go back to it, which is that's all I'm want.
That's
That's all I
complimentary.
want. That's all I want.
Yeah, Andy says thanks for the shout out. Brandy and my groups are book nerds and horror nerds.
Definitely check that. Those are great groups. Great way, even if you're not a writer, you're just a reader, you can find out about stuff. Because here's the thing, you can't just expect Amazon or what other algorithms to trickle through you and you're just going to get the same stuff over and over. You have to make an active effort to find some of the folks out there. And it takes a little bit of time, but that's where you can do it. You can go to those groups, you can go to Denver Horror Collective, places like that to find your new favorite author. My favorite horror author, his name is Richard Gavin. And I found him literally in a Boulder bookstore, just searching through the used books.
Oh,
Sylvan
cool.
Dread. Weird. What is this? Horror about the forest, my favorite. And he's my favorite author. And Google didn't suggest that to me.
Yeah.
No one suggested that to me. I found it myself, and he is my favorite living horror author. So do that, folks.
Yeah, that's great. Go to your local favorite, bookshop and just sit around, get lost, and see what you discover. It's, and bookshops are making that comeback too. Along with vinyl stores and everything. Even after or during a pandemic, they're finding ways to thrive.
That's good. It's really important. Yeah, I think bookstores are super important. Certainly we can't just count on Amazoth to be our overlord.
Well, and there's that human experience, that interconnectivity. When you're going to check out, you're finding the book, you're talking to people. It's like, hey, what are you reading? I'm into that. I'm not into that. You're not going to get that online.
No.
You get comments and Messenger, but there's a detachment and anonymity to it as well.
Totally agree. Yeah, I love bookstores. That's pretty much the only stores I even go into. I don't buy a lot of stuff, but bookstores, that's I keep filling up my shelf with used books. That's tends to be once in a while I buy new books. And yeah, Malinae is not used yet. So if you really need to buy a used book, you can buy it from somebody else who just bought it, I guess. But yeah.
Nice. The Andy said vagina dentana. Dentana, I think is what he's. Yeah. So
that's the teeth, vagina. Yep. There we go.
Yeah. Brandy just watched the same movie too. So
that's a whole subgenre there, I guess.
Right. Yeah. I think it dates back to the Greeks with that, but I think that's what is it? Like man's fear of the female form, so to speak.
That's probably part of it.
Yeah, and then it's here. Joy chimed in. The money going to Southern Ute is my favorite part of this anthology.
So yeah, that's all. 20% of proceeds of profits go to Southern Ute for consumed. Yep.
Nice. That's fantastic. Josh, it's been great catching up with you. You're looking amazing, sir, and I can't wait to read the Jewish Book of Horror. That sounds absolutely amazing, and that'll be out Hanukkah 2021.
That's
so
right.
At the end of November, I think, right?
Correct.
Nice. That's fantastic. So for everybody watching out there, after we go, we sign off, go to denverhorror.com, and purchase 5280 Terra 5280. I'm talking too fast. And Consumed. pick up those anthologies. And then, Josh, where do they go for your novel?
So you can go to joshsworstnightmare.com. You can go to Amazon. You can go to godless.com. You can go to dntpublishing.com, any of those places. And also, we stashed a few of them out in random spots in the woods. So if you walk around in the woods, you might find one.
Oh, that's pretty cool. You'll find Malinae out in the woods, huh?
You probably won't, though.
Yeah, I won't. No.
No, you won't be finding anything anywhere for a little while, but you need to rest. That's most important for you.
Well, that's okay. I'll just get it digitally off of mutinyinformationcafe.com.
Perfect. That sounds
Excellent.
good. Well, thank you so much for having me. Always a pleasure, and glad you're not dead. That's good.
Yeah, I like not being dead, and I prefer other people not to be dead.
Me too. We're on the same page with that one.
Yeah. Cool. The Josh, stick around for a few minutes while I start signing off here. But for everybody else that tuned in, thanks so much for all your support and everything. And today's broadcast is brought to you by Helpfire Entertainment. Thanks for carrying us on your social media, and of course our friends at Mutiny Cafe. If you're going to start a revolution, make sure it's caffeinated. And, of course, Alien Donut Films, thanks for sponsoring us, Bill and Angela over there, and my producers, Stefan Santa Cruz and Amanda Armstrong. Everybody who tuned in, everybody out there, thanks so much. We appreciate your support. Be good, be kind, help each other out during these tough times. We love you. Have a good night.